Good afternoon. This is the Aspen City Council work session for March 24th, 2025. We have one item on our agenda this evening, and that is to interview for the Airport Advisory Board. And we have two applicants that are here to talk to us today. And both of you gentlemen, feel free to come on up to this front desk. We'll just do it together. Thank you guys for the interest and for getting your applications to us and letting us know your interest on such a tight schedule. We really do appreciate it, and we appreciate you making time to be here today as well, so thank you. So my first question is, are you both aware of the schedule, the meeting schedule for the Airport Advisory Committee? They get together, I think, on a monthly basis, or they will be. And you have no real conflict there. Making those meetings is something that both of you can do. That's great. Thank you very much. With that, I'll go ahead and let others ask some questions if they'd like.
Thank you guys for applying. I didn't see an application or a resume at all. I didn't see anything.
It is in your email from Mike Sear.
Okay, I looked at the agenda packet and didn't see anything there.
Okay. Yes, it didn't get changed into the packet, but it was supplied to you separately.
Okay. Give me a little, since I didn't see your,
Sure.
Could you give me a little background on what you can bring, what you will bring to the Airport Advisory Board, what your background is? You were on the AFC Vision, was that correct?
Well, I wasn't on the Vision Committee, but I was on one of its subcommittees along with the mayor, where we had the pleasure of serving on the least focused committee, which was called the Focus Committee. And I realize this is not, you want to make this a little bit interactive, and I'm all for that, but I prepared a 4-minute statement, so if it pleases the council, I'd like to read that to you, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have. In the context of my statement, Ward, I won't address any of my, CV details, because it is somewhere in someone's email or, and I think those credentials sort of speak for themselves. But I do think that there's a particular question which is germane to the council and important in your selection of the appropriate individual for this role, particularly because this role has no vote. It's an ex officio role. So the person who needs to represent the city needs to be able to convince his colleagues about the merits of his argument in representing the city's best interests. So if it pleases the council,
Would I just resent it to you?
I just found it.
Okay.
I kept looking at the packet that was on the.
Got it. Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Is that okay, Tori?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. First of all, and literally this is less than 5 minutes, but I think it's important to sort of frame what we're doing here today. First of all, Tori, I'd like to thank you for permitting me to apply for this, because my application, obviously, I thought it was tendered, but it was late, and I do appreciate, as a City of Aspen resident, allowing me to participate for consideration in this role, which I think is in the city's best interest, as I'll explain. Vis-a-vis the ASC's modernization, I firmly believe that the city's sole focus should be the robustness of the commercial air terminal's ground transportation hub in order to architect into it everything humanly possible to mitigate private vehicular transportation between ASC and the core, and to a lesser extent, Snowmass Village. Modesty aside, I believe I am the intellectual godfather of the terminals, the new terminals, the to-be-built terminals, multimodal ground transportation hub. The epiphany that occurred to me when we both served Tori on the Vision Committee during the visioning process 7 years ago was that the visioning committee saw in its inimitable wisdom that the focus group was a complete orphan. Among all of the ASC visioning groups, the focus group was, had no focus whatsoever. Moreover, the focus group contained such a diverse group of participants in terms of education, professions, and perspectives that little consensus seemed possible. It was, therefore, I approached Rich Engelhardt, who was running the process for Pitkin County as its deputy manager, titularly in charge of the airport. I approached him to create a mission for the focus group, and that mission was the conceptual development of a ground transportation center that would be fully integrated into the commercial terminal. This multimodal hub would accommodate, at least in theory and hopefully in reality, a wide range of ground transport modalities, including taxis, ride shares, bikes, hotel vans, and of course RAFTA, where there's like virtually no usage of RAFTA to get between the airport and the core. Rich sanctioned my idea and we were off and running. During the visioning process, I fleshed out how the hub might be designed into the terminal in order to facilitate fluidity of ground transportation between disembarking airline passengers and their destinations in the core and Snowmass Village. I examined a variety of multimodal hubs in larger cities like the Oculus in New York, the Anaheim Regional Transportation Center, and the Transbay Transit Center in San Francisco. Now, of course, these centers are vastly larger than anything that will ever be built at the airport, but they would share in common some fundamental characteristics in terms of ingress and egress, wayfinding, and convenience for the traveler. Also during the visioning process, I identified funding sources for the terminal, such as TIFIA funds that had been unintentionally omitted from consideration by the county's financial advisors. TIFIA stands for the Transportation Infrastructure Innovation Finance Act. For eligible projects, you can finance over a 35-year term at low interest rates, up to 49% of defined eligible project costs. However, the ASC Multimodal Ground Transportation Club, as it's conceived, would qualify for TIFIA financing. Now, why do I go through this? As a citizen of Aspen, my immediate concern is the robustness of this new transportation hub, because it may be in jeopardy. Hence my interest in this position, because I strongly believe the hub is essential to mitigate vehicular transportation into the core and then from the core out to the airport. As you fellows may know, I've served on the county's financial advisory board for 7 years. In addition, I was the only private sector individual to serve on ASC's FBO Operator Selection Committee. In performing these roles, I personally assisted county staff and Peacock in particular in designing the new FBO lease and facilitating its closing with Atlantic Aviation. In so doing, I always kept 2 eyes on the structure of the lease in case it would be needed to be pledged or hypothecated in order to finance the commercial air terminal and its integrated multimodal transportation hub. So here's my concern, if it's not already obvious. The costs of the terminal, like all large infrastructure projects, which you've seen with Lumberyard, has escalated exponentially. This inevitably is going to put pressure on the airport's sources of funding. Moreover, the ASC modernization debate, public debate, has taken so long that the funding from the bipartisan infrastructure bill is no longer assured. Supplemental and alternative, potentially very creative sources of funding are going to be necessary. They're going to have to be identified, negotiated, and procured. And what frightens me the most at the moment is that the downsizing of the hub may become an attractive way for the county to cut the costs of the terminal's budget. And this is something, as my fellow citizens, for my fellow citizens in Aspen, this is something that I would fight tooth and nail. By the merits of my arguments because I will not have a vote on this board. Now, it is a board, it's an advisory board, so I'm not so sure how important my vote will be relative to the arguments that I will convey to my fellow board members. But I submit to you that as a resident of Aspen, I'm the single best person to ensure that no corners are cut with respect to the ground transportation hub, which, as I've said, should be your singular focus. Now that the debate has ended, the airport will be modernized, and we're off to the races. We just want to make sure that it best fits our needs and addresses the traffic issue that affects us all. So that's what I wanted to say as my preamble, to sort of frame, how you view me and what my motivations are, and I'm happy to answer any other questions, including of my new friend, Mr. Ruby.
Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Robert, I mean, we might as well just jump in with no prepared statement from you or whatever, but after hearing what Evan his intention there and what his focus is on.
No, I'm very impressed with Evan's background, and I'm sure either of us are well qualified, and I know you have a very tough decision to make. Just with respect to me, and I indicated this on my application, I'm a third-generation Aspen pilot, grandson of Ruby Park, who was a naval aviator in World War II, learned to fly gliders here from a guy named Dieter Bivig. I don't know if any of you had the benefit of knowing him, but I can still hear his voice in my head and making sure that my stick and rudder skills were great. I live the airport every day. I will actually, after this meeting, I will get on my bike, I will ride to my house, I will pick up my bag, I will walk to the 8th Street bus station, and I will take a bus to the airport. I do know it's not horrifically convenient, and it can be better, but my intimate knowledge of, one, the way the FBO works, my intimate knowledge of the other pilots here, and the pain of which it is to fly in and out of here commercially, I think would make me a good and practical member of the board as well. That's all I've got to say on that.
Thanks so much. I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
I think that if I understand the flying that you do you fly in and out of places like Bozeman, Montana? Have you flown there? And whether it's Telluride or some of the other small mountain airports, you fly in and out of some of those locations?
I do. I fly to, for instance, my wife and I run the Ouray to Telluride race every, fall. And so I fly into Telluride. And I can tell you this, Aspen's a harder airport to get in and out of than Telluride because they have a fixed ILS approach and we don't. And to the extent that we can improve on that, that would be one of my number one safety recommendations that I would fault. But I don't know if I addressed your question.
I was just going to ask you if there was an airport that you utilize sometimes that you really enjoy, that's something that maybe future build here in Aspen you would say, hey, take a look at this place. This is a good example.
Look, from a best practices perspective, the job that the FBO does currently is extraordinary relative to the volume of traffic that they get. And I think we could point at Telluride, or we could point at Bozeman, or we could point at, San Luis Obispo, all of which are airports I love. For instance, there's an FBO in Bozeman that actually has a live fireplace. I'm not saying that we need that, especially from a pollution standpoint, but those little touches are extraordinary. Those guys are not dealing with what we are dealing with, one, from a safety perspective, and two, from a volume perspective.
Thank you.
But I would highly say, let's get best practices from everyone and see how to implement them.
Thank you for that. Any questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering, have both or either of you attended Aspen Airport Advisory Board meetings in the past, and any recently?
I was there last week.
Do you attend regularly, or is that?
I don't attend regularly, but I frequently download their meetings, particularly when there's a subject that interests me. The latest issue that sort of has my attention is the RFQ that's coming back from the architects, the middle of next month. And I'm a little bit concerned that it's been designed improperly, and here's why. We really don't know who's going to respond to design the commercial air terminal. I would suspect that there could be a number of architects like Sir Norman Foster, Rienzo Piana, Frank Gehry, who would really enjoy the prestige of designing the Aspen Pitkin County commercial air terminal. The problem that I have with that is that I think it's misconceived that you have one RFQ, which leads to a singular RFP, because if you have these architectural geniuses design a terminal, the one thing that you could be assured of is however high the budget is for the terminal, it's going to be higher, because these guys know no bounds in terms of the aesthetic and the cost of generating that aesthetic that they will plan and recommend to the community. So were I on the Airport Advisory Board and I had input into the county's design of the RFQ and the RFP, I would bifurcate the contract such that you had a design architect proposal and then you had another companion RFQ and RFP process for a production architect who would translate the vision of the design architect into something that's practical and affordable. So with that, I think that they'll inevitably come to this conclusion, and eventually they're going to have to, they'll bifurcate these contracts, and it's just going to slow things down.
Sorry, Robert, just wanted back to one thing you said. Just to understand, I think you said something about RFQ only producing one RFP member. I remember when we did the lumberyard, we did an RFQ, but we had many qualify for the RFP.
Yeah, well, I think that what they should have done is they had an RFQ for design and an RFQ for production drawings.
So just separating
So
them.
they're just they're separated. And eventually, the design architect and the production architect would have to collaborate, but, when designing the RFQ, you'd want to make sure that the design architect and the production architect gave examples of how they collaborated to maintain the integrity of a beautiful design, yet they worked in a collaborative way in order to do the right value engineering to come up with something that's affordable.
And Robert, sorry, the same question was.
Same question, yes.
was
So
about attending the meetings.
I was, my most active role recently was with respect to the FBO. I was doing everything that I could to basically comment and try to shape that FBO outcome, which in some ways I feel was a great outcome for the county, especially from a financial perspective, but there's a big portion of it now that needs implementation with respect to your constituents, especially as it relates to the west side of the development of the airport, which is where they're going to push most of the GA going forward.
Got it. And then one last question I can think of is, are you guys close with any current members of the Airport Advisory Board? I ask this because you're going to be ex officio, so do you know like Jackie Francis or Valerie Braun, or like, do you feel like you can convince them of your opinions? Do you know them personally, or is it more going to be that you're going to make the arguments and hope that they respond well to them?
Look, I've known Jackie forever.
That was just one, but yeah.
What's that?
That was just one name, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I have known Jackie forever, and look, she takes a very environmentally conscious approach to the airport. And if you look at the vision goals that were articulated, one of the big goals was basically a reduction of total emissions from the airport. And so her perspective is extremely important going forward. And to the extent that, I can make sure that we're all in alignment on that, which is easy, that's going to be an easy one. I think some of the harder ones will be, from a financial perspective, I thought that some of the outcomes on the pilots were a little hard with respect to the FBO, but it is what it is at this point.
Got it.
I know virtually all of the members on a personal and sometimes professional basis, because I've been involved with them over the last 7 years, commencing with the visioning process. And Frankly, that's why I really felt I didn't need a vote on this board, because if I can't convince them based on the merits of my argument, and I'd be assured that based on the collegial relationship, they would give my arguments, a reasonable consideration. I feel as if I'm not going to lose anything by not having a vote, in particular because it would be very unlikely that my vote would be dispositive in changing an outcome.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Well, it's an ex officio member, and there are 3 new members that are going to be appointed by the BOCC. So we're going to have 4 new members on the board, and I'm wondering if you would both commit to attending the meetings and being involved and engaged. And I think it's important for the future council to be briefed regularly on the meetings. I don't think we've had a lot of communication from our ex officio representative in the past. And I think it would help the future council to have that. Could you both be involved, knowing that you're non-voting members anyway?
Absolutely. It would be helpful, and I think administratively desirable, that among the 5 council members, you would designate one person who would be our point of contact. But yes, I'm happy to provide regular updates.
And your vision is to supply an update through one member of the board of the council?
Well, at least the point of communication, and then if there needs to be a presentation before the entire council, that's of course, at your discretion, not mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You guys both went to Wharton.
What class? I guess we're both disqualified.
John, any questions?
Couple statements. I think we'd be lucky to have either one of you, and I'm hoping there's a way that we can use both of you going forward. I was really happy to hear your remarks, Evan, about multimodal transportation between here and the airport, because that's a huge interest of mine. The question is, have either of you seen or heard of Edward Olemon's What If Lab concept for transit solutions between the airport and Aspen?
I remember that through the visioning process. I'm not sure all of his creative alternatives are practical and financeable, but yes, for sure. I mean, he's a brilliant guy.
Mm-hmm. I was just curious because I agree there were some things that I thought would never be able to be pulled off, but there were some really interesting ideas in his presentation. I know he's been refining it, so anyway, I look forward to him presenting that to the general public so we can all see what it's all about. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. I think it's best said, we are lucky to have the 2 of you here talking to us. Thank you so much. We're going to actually bring it back to our table tomorrow night at our regular scheduled meeting, where we'll just discuss and make a decision. But if there's I'm going to reach out to the board and just see if there's a way that we can have you guys in the room. So we'll know more tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for making time to come over here today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Sam, it was nice to meet you as well.
Yeah.
Cheers.
What is going on with all these qualified candidates we're getting for boards?
Yeah, absolutely. Damn.